The very first time my mother-in-law tore my dress right off me, it happened in the middle of a packed shopping mall while she was shouting that people like me deserved exactly that kind of treatment. All around me, strangers immediately pulled out their phones and started recording everything, like my humiliation was some kind of public show for their entertainment. I was left standing there in my underwear, completely exposed and crying uncontrollably, when out of nowhere, two men in expensive suits pushed through the crowd and called me Little Sister. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I want to share the most humiliating but also strangely life changing day I've ever lived through. What happened to me in that mall is something I will never be able to forget, though not for the reasons you might expect. This is the story of how the very people who were supposed to stand by me ended up turning into my worst enemies, and how the family I thought I had lost forever eventually became the ones who saved me. Let me start from the beginning. 2 years ago, I married Javier, fully believing I was stepping into a completely new life. I come from a very modest background. My parents passed away when I was still young, and I was raised by my grandmother in a small apartment. I also had two older brothers, Raul and Lucas, both extremely smart and driven. After finishing university, they left the country to chase business opportunities and build successful careers abroad. As time went on, we slowly drifted apart, mostly because I was focused on building my own life, and honestly because I felt embarrassed that I hadn't accomplished as much as they had. When I first met Javier, he seemed absolutely perfect to me, kind, attentive, and coming, at least on the surface, from a very wealthy and respected family. His parents, Beatrice and Jorge, lived in a stunning house on the edge of the city. His sister Monica always dressed in high-end designer clothes, drove luxury cars, and everything about them screamed money and status. I genuinely believed that marrying into that family would finally give me the stability I had always been searching for, but I was completely wrong. From the moment I stepped into their home, Beatrice made it painfully clear that I didn't belong there. She constantly made cutting remarks about my inexpensive clothes, my humble upbringing, and my lack of higher education. I still don't understand how Javier ended up settling for someone like you, Beatrice would say calmly, sipping her coffee as if she were commenting on something trivial like the weather. With his position, he could have chosen any girl in our social circle, she would add with clear disdain. Jorge would just sit there and quietly nod, never once stepping in to defend me, while Monica laughed along and made her own cruel remarks like it was all some kind of joke. But what hurt me the most was Javier's reaction. The man I had married, the one who promised to love me and protect me, would stay completely silent every time his family tore into me. And at times, he even went further than silence. He would make jokes saying I needed to try harder if I wanted to fit into his world. I felt like I was slowly drowning in a constant wave of criticism, disrespect, and rejection, with no way to come up for air. I worked part-time at a small local bookstore, and even though the pay was barely anything, I still put almost every dollar I earned toward household expenses. Beatrice would take my money without a second thought, but she never missed a chance to tell me it wasn't enough and that I wasn't truly contributing. On top of that, she loaded most of the housework onto me, treating me less like a family member and more like hired help living under her roof. I kept holding on to the hope that things would eventually improve, that maybe one day they would accept me. But instead, every single day seemed to bring a new way for them to humiliate me. The real breaking point came when Beatrice announced she was going to throw a massive 60th birthday celebration at the most luxurious shopping mall in the city. It wasn't just a simple family gathering, it was a high-end social event, designed so all her wealthy friends could see how perfect and refined her family was. She spent weeks obsessing over every tiny detail, making sure everything looked flawless on the surface. A few days before the celebration, she finally handed me a shopping bag with this smug, satisfied smile on her face. "This is your outfit for my birthday," she said, like it was already decided. Inside was a cheap, tacky red dress that looked like it had been pulled straight from a discount rack. The fabric was thin and scratchy, and the moment I held it up, I could tell it was at least 2 sizes too small for me. "Beatrice, I don't think this is going to fit me," I said softly, trying my best to stay calm and respectful. She let out this cold little laugh, almost amused by me. "It's perfect for someone of your stature," she replied, her tone dripping with sarcasm. And besides, she added, we can't have you looking too good and stealing attention from the real members of this family. Monica, who was standing right beside her, immediately burst out laughing. Oh, Mom, it's perfect. Exactly what she deserves, she said between giggles. Javier walked past, glanced at the dress, and just shrugged like it didn't matter at all. Just wear it, Sarah. It's only for one day, he said casually, completely indifferent. In that moment, my stomach dropped as I finally understood something I didn't want to believe. This wasn't random cruelty. This had been carefully planned from the very beginning to humiliate me. They wanted me to look terrible, to feel out of place every single second, and to never forget what they believed my place was. The morning of Beatrice's birthday finally arrived, and I put on that red dress they had forced on me. It was so tight I could barely breathe, and so short that I felt exposed, uncomfortable, and completely vulnerable in my own body. When I looked at myself in the mirror, tears started to rise in my eyes, but I forced them back down. You just have to get through today, I whispered to myself, trying to steady my nerves. When we arrived at the mall, I was honestly stunned by how extravagant everything was. Huge crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, marble floors reflected the bright lighting, and luxury boutiques stretched down every corridor. Beatrice's guests were already gathered at the most exclusive restaurant in the building, and the moment we walked in, I could feel every single gaze land on me. Her friends immediately started whispering among themselves, openly judging my cheap and completely out-of-place dress. I tried to make myself as small as possible, just staying quiet and hoping I wouldn't draw any attention, but Beatrice clearly had something else in mind for me. She suddenly turned toward her group of friends and announced loudly with a fake, polished smile, "Ladies, I'd like you to meet my son's wife." The way she said wife made it sound almost insulting, like it was some uncomfortable label she barely tolerated and wanted to distance herself from. As you can see, she comes from a very different kind of background than our family, she added, her voice dripping with contempt. The women immediately started looking me up and down without even trying to hide it, their expressions a mix of disgust and pity that made me feel like I was shrinking inside myself. One of them even lifted her hand to her mouth like she was trying not to laugh outright. But what came next was so much worse. After lunch, while we were walking through the mall, Beatrice suddenly stopped right in the middle of the main walkway where hundreds of people were passing by, shopping and talking. "I can't be seen with you like this," she said loudly enough that people nearby definitely heard her. "That dress is completely inappropriate and it's a disgrace to our family name." I could feel my whole face burning with shame, like everyone around me could see straight through me. "Beatrice, please, let's just go home," I begged her in a low, shaky voice, barely able to breathe from how overwhelmed I felt. But she wasn't done. "No," she said coldly, without even hesitating. "This ends here, right now. You need to understand your place once and for all." What happened next still plays in my mind like a nightmare I can't wake up from. Beatrice grabbed the shoulders of my dress with both hands, and before I even had time to react, she yanked and ripped it straight off me. The cheap fabric tore instantly, and in seconds I was standing in the middle of that crowded mall in nothing but my white underwear. I screamed and instinctively tried to cover myself, completely panicking and in shock, but Jorge was right behind me, blocking any way out. Javier was there too, his face bright red, but not in a way that showed concern for me, more like embarrassment for himself. "This is what happens when trash tries to act like it belongs with decent people," Beatrice shouted at the top of her lungs. And then, right in front of everyone, Monica pulled out her phone and started recording, laughing like it was the funniest thing she had ever seen. "This is going straight to social media," she yelled, holding the phone up high. "Everyone needs to see the pathetic loser my brother married." By then, the crowd around us had grown even bigger. Some people were laughing, others looked horrified, and many were already filming like this was some kind of public entertainment. I was crying uncontrollably at that point, completely broken, trying to cover myself with my hands while Beatrice kept attacking me with her words. "Look at her," she shouted. "She ruined my son's life. This nobody who doesn't even deserve to breathe the same air as decent people." There were security guards nearby, but they just stood there hesitating, unsure how to step into what looked like a family conflict. I felt completely alone, like there was no one in that entire place who would help me. Then suddenly, Beatrice picked up my torn dress from the floor and threw it into a nearby trash can. "That's where it belongs," she said with a cruel, satisfied smile. "Just like you." I was on the cold marble floor, curled up, shaking and crying, when all of a sudden I heard a strange murmur rising from the crowd. People began to shift and part in the crowd, whispering more urgently now, like something big and unexpected was unfolding right in front of them. There was a rising energy in the air, confusion, curiosity, even excitement, as strangers tried to figure out what was happening. Through my tears, I could barely see at first, but then I noticed two men pushing calmly through the sea of people. They were wearing perfectly tailored dark suits that looked expensive enough to belong in a magazine, and they moved with a quiet confidence that made everyone instinctively step aside for them. Everything about them gave off power, the way they held their shoulders, the controlled pace of their steps, even the subtle shine of luxury watches on their wrists that caught the mall lights. For a moment, I just stared, not fully understanding why they felt so familiar. But as they came closer, something in my chest tightened, their faces. I knew them. I just couldn't believe it at first. And then it hit me all at once, like a wave crashing over me. My heart literally stopped for a second. It was Raoul and Lucas, my brothers. The same brothers I had lost touch with for years, now walking straight toward me like they had been searching for this exact moment. And they weren't just there, they looked different, stronger, colder, more controlled. I had never seen them like this before. Their expressions were calm on the surface, but their eyes told a completely different story. There was a deep, burning anger there, sharp and focused, like they were holding it back only because of where we were standing. It made the air around them feel heavier, like even the crowd sensed it and went quiet without realizing why. Raoul, my older brother, reached me first. Without saying a word, he immediately took off his suit jacket and gently placed it over my shoulders, covering me from the eyes of everyone around. It wasn't just protective, it felt grounding, like I was finally being pulled back into safety. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm but firm in a way that made people stop completely. "Anyone who touches our sister will have to answer to us." Lucas stood slightly to the side, scanning the entire scene with a cold, precise look, as if he was taking mental notes of every single person present. He wasn't reacting emotionally, he was calculating, observing, already understanding everything that had happened just from a glance. Beatrice's expression changed instantly. Her confidence collapsed so fast it was almost hard to believe. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out at first. She just stared at them, confused and suddenly uneasy. She clearly had no idea who they were, but their presence alone made her take an involuntary step back. Who are you?" she finally stammered, her voice no longer loud or controlled. Lucas gave a small, calm smile, but it didn't feel friendly at all. It was controlled, almost polite on the surface, but cold underneath. The kind of smile that makes people realize they are not in control of the situation anymore. "Allow me to introduce myself," he said evenly, his tone soft but carrying an unmistakable edge. "I'm Lucas, and this is my brother Raoul. We are Sarah's family, her real family, and we also happen to own 40% of this mall." The reaction was immediate and explosive in a quiet way, like the entire atmosphere of the place changed at once. A wave of shocked whispers spread through the crowd. People gasped, turning to look at each other as the realization sank in. Even the mall staff nearby froze. The mall manager, who had been watching everything unfold from a distance, suddenly rushed forward, clearly panicked, his face pale as he approached them. "Mr. Raoul, sir, we had no idea you were here today. Please, is there anything we can do?" I just sat there on the floor, unable to process what I was hearing or seeing. It all felt unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life. Beatrice, who had been so loud and confident just moments ago, was now completely pale. It looked like the blood had drained from her face all at once. Jorge began to step back slowly, stumbling over his own words, suddenly looking unsure and afraid in a way I had never seen before. And Monica, her hands shook as she tried to hide her phone, clearly panicking as she realized what she had just recorded and what it could mean for her. And Javier looked like he wanted to disappear off the face of the earth right then and there, like if he stayed still enough, he might just fade out of existence. Raoul kept his arm firmly around me the entire time, not letting go even for a second, like he was afraid I might break again if he loosened his grip. Meanwhile, Lucas was already on his phone, moving fast and calm at the same time, making calls without hesitation. "Yes, this is Lucas," he said in a steady voice. "I need our legal team at the mall immediately. We're dealing with an urgent situation." He paused for a moment, listening carefully, his expression not changing at all. "No, this isn't a business issue," he continued. "This is personal. My sister has been publicly assaulted and humiliated. I want everything documented, every witness, every recording, and every person involved identified immediately." In just a few seconds, the entire atmosphere around us shifted completely. The same security guards who had been unsure and passive earlier suddenly moved in, forming a protective perimeter and asking for instructions like everything had changed overnight. The mall manager kept apologizing over and over again, looking completely shaken and desperate, like his career depended on fixing what had already happened. Even the people who had been filming my humiliation moments ago were now scrambling to delete their videos, panic setting in as they realized this was no longer just gossip or entertainment. It had legal consequences. But my brothers still weren't done. Lucas slowly turned his attention back to Beatrice. His expression didn't change, but his voice dropped into something colder and sharper. "Madam," he said firmly, "you have just committed assault and forced public humiliation against a member of our family. You filmed it, you distributed it publicly, and you did it with the clear intent to cause psychological harm. My legal team will be very interested in speaking with you." Beatrice took a shaky step back, her entire composure completely gone. "Wait, please," she stammered, her voice breaking. "There's been a misunderstanding. We're family. It was just a family argument." But Raoul raised his hand slightly, cutting her off immediately without raising his voice. She stopped being your family the moment you laid hands on her," he said firmly, "and we lost interest in your excuses the moment we saw our sister crying on that floor." Then Lucas shifted his gaze to Javier, and his tone grew even colder than before. "And you," he said, "the man who promised to protect her but stood by while she was destroyed, are going to learn that breaking promises to someone we love has consequences." Within less than an hour, the entire mall had practically turned into a coordinated legal operation. Lawyers arrived quickly, moving with purpose. Private investigators began speaking to witnesses, collecting statements, and securing evidence. The videos Monica and the others had recorded were recovered and backed up immediately, now being treated as official evidence rather than social media content. And then something even more shocking began to unfold. Lucas started making more calls, this time quieter, more strategic, and I could only watch in disbelief as Beatrice's perfect world started collapsing in real time. It turned out that Jorge was employed at a company that had serious business connections with one of my brother's firms, and with just one phone call, that entire business relationship was terminated on the spot. Monica's credit cards, paid through her parents' accounts, were suddenly frozen without any warning at all. At the same time, Beatrice's membership at her elite country club was immediately suspended, cutting her off from the social circle she cared about so much. And for Javier, things became even more final. He received the divorce papers I had quietly prepared months earlier, the ones I never had the courage to actually hand him. My brother's legal team delivered them to him right there, along with a restraining order already in place. The most satisfying moment of all was watching mall security escort Beatrice, Jorge, and Monica out of the building while also officially banning them from returning. As they were being led away, Beatrice tried one last desperate attempt to save face. "Please, we didn't know who she was," she pleaded. "If we had known she had powerful brothers, we never would have done any of this." But Lucas let out a short, dry laugh with absolutely no warmth in it and cut her off immediately. "That's exactly the point," he said coldly. "You treated her like that precisely because you believed she had no one to protect her. And now you're not sorry for what you did. You're only upset because there are consequences." That same afternoon, my brothers took me to an apartment they had already prepared for me in one of the most exclusive buildings in the entire city. When I walked inside, I was completely overwhelmed. I had never seen a place like that in my life. Everything was quiet, elegant, and impossibly beautiful, like something out of a different world. Sitting there with them, surrounded by a level of comfort I never thought I would experience, they finally told me the full truth about everything they had built over the years. They explained that they had grown a technology empire with operations in multiple countries, expanding far beyond anything I had ever imagined. They also told me they had investments in a wide range of industries, from real estate to major tech corporations, including even shopping centers like the one where everything had happened. "We never stopped looking for you, Sarah," Raoul said quietly, his voice steady but emotional in a way he rarely showed. "We tried to reach you many times, but your number had changed and we lost track." He continued explaining that it was actually Daniel, a mutual friend who eventually recognized me in an old family photo Javier had once posted online. From there, everything started to connect piece by piece, like a puzzle finally falling into place. They also discovered that another acquaintance, someone who had gone to school with Javier, had seen the same photo and unknowingly confirmed details that helped them track my life down completely. My brothers had already been trying to find a way back to me when they received an emergency call from someone at the mall who recognized me from old family pictures, which ultimately brought them to me at the perfect moment. The following weeks became a blur of legal actions, consequences, and irreversible changes in everyone's lives. Beatriz and Jorge eventually lost their home because of the overwhelming legal and financial fallout they were forced to face. And Monica, for the first time in her life, had to take on a real job, something she had never needed to do before and was completely unprepared for. Javier spent months trying to reach me, sending apology after apology, but by that point the damage was already done, and nothing he said could undo what had happened. And honestly, the most important part of everything I went through wasn't revenge, and it wasn't even justice, although I can't deny that both of those moments felt satisfying in their own way. What mattered most was something deeper. I reconnected with my siblings, and for the first time in years, I started to remember who I was before all that abuse made me believe I didn't matter. I eventually started working at one of my brother's companies, not because I needed to rely on them, but because I genuinely had skills and ideas I wanted to contribute. At the same time, I began going to therapy to process everything I had been through, and slowly, step by step, I learned something I had never been taught in that house: how to set boundaries and how to demand the respect I deserved. About 6 months later, I met Andres. He was calm, kind, and worked as a teacher. From the very first day, he treated me like I actually had value, like I mattered just as I was. A year after that terrible day in the mall, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. It was Javier's wedding. He was marrying the daughter of one of Beatrice's friends. Without even thinking about it for more than a second, I tore the invitation up and threw it in the trash. Then I went out shopping for my own engagement celebration because Andres had proposed to me just a week earlier. The last time I heard about my former in-laws was that they had moved into a much smaller apartment and were struggling financially. Beatrice, the same woman who once looked down on everyone, was even forced to take a part-time job in a department store, the exact kind of work she used to mock and insult. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about what happened to them afterward, and the honest answer is no, I don't. They broke me down because it gave them pleasure at the time, because they thought they could. What came after wasn't revenge from me. It was simply the natural result of their own choices catching up to them. And my happiness came from something completely different. It came from finally learning to value myself and never letting anyone take that away again.